Hello, and welcome to Behind the Headlines here on WTAJ Plus. I hope you know who I am. I'm Marty Radovanic, and I'm pleased to be starting this new project, which basically is going to be exactly what it says, Behind the Headlines. We're going to look at stories, events. We're going to talk about them, maybe do a little deeper dive than we would do in a normal newscast. Our first edition favors an old friend. And I don't say old as a way of being disrespectful, although he is 2 years older than I am. Right. You probably recognize him. He's John McClintock, who was a reporter at WTAJ. John, tell me again, it was late 70s?
It would have been 74 to 79.
74 to 79. He also had a bit of a political bent to him. He ran some campaigns and did things. But for this discussion, both of us are going to go back to an event that on Sunday will celebrate, or mark is probably a better way of saying it, the 48th anniversary of the Johnstown flood of 1977. And I want to ask you, I mean, we can go through, and we will, some of the statistical, the 85 people who died and the damages and stuff. I could, as a young person, I was 25, I had no idea. I'd never seen anything like that. And as you're talking about it, we were literally in the middle of it. One first memory that I don't think I'll ever forget, we were crossing Market Street at Maine. We were going from where City Hall is to what is now a part of Lee Hospital. Actually, it's now the Crichton Rehabilitation Center. But back then, it was the Big J Savings Bank Plaza, and we were crossing through waist-high water, walking on a diagonal, and there was a state policeman standing on the corner on the opposite side where we were headed, who saw me crossing, and he said, "Hey, Mark, be careful, there are open manhole covers." And I'm looking at black water to my waist. I stopped, and my photographer, Dave Delosier, and I, we slid our feet across because we knew if we hit the manhole, we were gone.
Yeah.
In fact, there were people that were later found in Seward that's exactly what happened to them. They hit the manhole. But it was just the sheer enormity of it, something I'd only seen in pictures. Was that a similar first impression for you?
Well, I don't think I can imagine that a place where I live, this had all happened right there.
Yeah.
No, it was far enough. I knew this was something I probably would never see again.
Right.
And it was probably one of my earlier sights of seeing Johnstown, period. So I did not have any before and after kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And getting in 56 to see Johnstown was half a day at the time. But no, this, I can't relate to you like you can. I would go home and everything would be fine. Our power would be restored. But over in Altoona area, where we had been seeing the storm all night long, it had knocked Channel 10 studios off the air, but not the transmitter. And so it was an inconvenience here. Over there, it was a matter of life and death.
Yeah, it was. We were without power, and in fact, WJAC, we had no power at our studio, and no power. We got power back to the studio, but the transmitter had been knocked out, so we were not on the air. The flooding started Tuesday night. We didn't get back on the air until sometime late day Thursday.
That was the best thing to ever happen to our ratings, apparently.
Yeah. But and it was trying to. You couldn't encapsulate everything that had happened because it was just massive. I remember interviewing the then county coroner Joseph Govecker outside of Conemaugh Hospital, and he was telling me about temporary morgues that had been set up, and he was already expecting, and at that time there may have been 3, maybe 10 people who they thought had perished. There was no concept of the fact that it would end up as 85 dead, but he did. He thought there was going to be a lot. And then the worst, as we learned through the day and trying to get to where we wanted to go, was virtually impossible. Right. The little community of Tanneryville was, in essence, wiped out when the Laurel Run Dam, which sat above Tanneryville, was an old earthen dam, and it gave way.
Right.
And the stories from there were people that literally were swept away while they slept. And when we were talking about the flooding in Texas a week and a half ago over the July 4th weekend, I'm thinking that's exactly what had happened. It was middle of the night. No one knew the dam was going to break, obviously. And the bizarre after effects. I remember one house sitting, what it looked like, in Tanneryville on an island for some reason, when the dam broke, the waters that came rushing down and wiped out entire families had diverted so that this house sat untouched,
Spared.
untouched. Okay, and you could just see water and mud and debris all around it, but the house itself was fine, and the people inside of it were fine. Our guest today, and I'm very happy and honored to have Sheriff Jim Ott, Blair County Sheriff, with us. You're a busy guy, so I appreciate you taking the time. And I want some perspective so that when people listen to the kind of questions I'm going to ask you and the answers you're going to give, I want them to understand why we're talking to you. So give me a background. Where did Jim Ott, the police officer, the sheriff, law enforcement, where did that come from? How long have you done it? What's your background?
I'm old. So.
Well, you're not as old as I am, so we'll just leave
true.
that subject alone, if you don't
that's
mind.
So this is actually counting my academy time. This is my 32nd year in law enforcement. So I've worked for a variety of different departments, all in Blair County throughout my career. Probably the most or the longest tenured was 20 years with Duncansville Borough, where I retired as the chief of police whenever I ran for my first election and became sheriff. I now am running, we'll wrap up this fall for my third term, so that'll give me, at the conclusion of that one, will give me 12 years in as sheriff then. And so it's been a very rewarding career.
If you're on the front line, okay, you're an officer on the front line and there's a problem in a neighborhood and you go into it, whether these people are trying to espouse a cause or not, if they're throwing rocks or fire bombs or whatever at you, you're in a different situation than what you would normally have expected while you are doing your law enforcement work. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, and so that's why more and more, when you asked about the training, are we training
Right.
differently? So we didn't really have, the early part of my career, you heard about certain riot issues or
Right,
certain even
right.
riot training. Now a normal standard training that we have is civil unrest. So we train for that. And we put our staff through at least the basics of it, and obviously any advanced training we can find or we can have available to us. So across the Commonwealth, you'll see there's a lot more preparation for that. Again, people are absolutely entitled to their right. They're entitled to freedom of speech. They're entitled to protest, gather in groups, and stand for what you believe in.
Right.
Whether I believe in it or not doesn't matter. You're entitled to do that. And that's what one of the things our great nation has, that we can do those things. The problem we have is when it becomes violent. We're going from standing a point of what we believe in to turning it into violence because we disagree with it.
Yep.
Or some, like you said, don't even really have a say in it. They just look for an opportunity. And there are those opportunists out there.
And you know that that's something that's
Sure.
potentially going to happen. And along those lines, we used to say, well, it's not going to happen here. Can you say that anymore?
No, I don't think any community, if they say that'll never happen here, really needs to step back and take a look and reevaluate their thinking and their process. Even here, we have a great community. We've always said, our community has really treated us well, and the community and its law enforcement all work well together. But with that being said, we've had riots here. We've had protests here. For the most part, our protests have been very peaceful. But we've had a few situations happen throughout this career that I've been in, so in the last 30 years plus,
Right.
where we've had some things that got out of control, where you listen to those others, our brothers or sisters in law enforcement, on the radio yelling for help because the crowd has consumed them, or they're go in to deal with one part of the situation. You referenced ICE.
Right.
You go in to deal with a situation, and now all of a sudden, what you had a clear path getting in has now closed on you, and now you're surrounded. How you're going to deal with that?
And I want to talk without the political implications, but January 6th, if you're sitting at home and you're watching on television, you cannot say that some of those officers weren't in grave danger, because you could see the people that were surrounding them that were very angry. You can't really train somebody for that type of a situation, can you?
No, you can train the basics. At some point, your best training will still only get you so far.
Right.
And the rest is people don't always like to do that in this day and age to say it. The rest is in the Lord's hands. The rest is we're in God's hands.
Out of
to
your
get home.
control.
Absolutely. And while we can be the best trained, The situation just may be that large that it consumes us and overruns us. In that particular incident, you had so much that happened.
Yeah.
No matter how you believe it happened.
That's not the point. I'm talking
Correct.
about you saw
Correct.
officers surrounded by very angry people.
Well, you also saw people that were there that weren't part of any type of violence who
Right.
also became victims.
Exactly. That's my point. Like, you see the video of the one officer whose head was caught in the doorway, and they're, I mean, that guy, I don't care what his political affiliation. At that moment, the only thing that mattered is that he was in grave danger.
Absolutely.
And it just seems to, you go back to the George Floyd demonstrations, which got out of hand, and people have talked about it recently in L.A., and it's not. Again, I'm not trying to, blame anybody, but it's a situation. We are so divisive. We are so divided as a nation, and we all know it. We see it, whatever side you're on. It doesn't matter what side you're on. But I just wonder, is this something that is going to resolve itself? Or as a leader of law enforcement, is that something in the back of your mind, and you just have to make sure that your people are ready? The man you're about to meet, even though I just met him today, right before we started this, is the closest thing that I know of an actual hero. This is a guy that's in a field that we normally associate with wealth and opulence and special position in society. And when you hear more about him and what he does, I think you're going to get an understanding of why none of that matters to him is what he is professionally educated to do, and that's what's so cool about it. But enough of that, because I'll get myself into a hole here, and then he'll tell me how long he's grew up watching me, and I'm going to feel really old. So we're gonna move on and let you meet Dr. Zane Gates, an Altoona physician, and you are everything opposite of. I'm not talking about your specialty, about treating people, but why in the world would somebody go to med school, go to college, Pitt, by the way, go Panthers?
Yes, sir.
Why would somebody go to college, go to med school, become a doctor, and then decide that, and we'll talk about this, I know you actually, not long after you started, you had a free medical clinic in a van?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, why would anybody go to be a doctor and do something like that?
Well, that's because you really believe that you really want to help people. Lots of people get happy, making a lot of money. Some people get happy with a lot of fame. But I think the greatest joy is when someone's at their darkest hour and they can turn to you. That's a better feeling than anything you could have on the planet. I mean, somebody who his life's in jeopardy, the people around them that they love and want them not to be harmed and not them to suffer. And in 15 minutes, what it should be, in an hour of your time, you can completely change the complexity of life. And I think that's the most powerful thing that I was lucky to get the opportunity to do and to become a physician.
When you decided, and I'd like to go back and I know you grew up in a public housing project here in Altoona.
Just right down the street from here.
Okay, so you came from not what would be typical, I suppose. And I don't like to characterize doctors as being, some kind of special person. My personal physician, I know where he grew up. I know where he went to school. I know the people that he hung out with. He wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and use all of those cliches. But still, you grew up in a public housing project. Did you know when you were growing up, A, that you wanted to be a doctor, and B, that you were going to be the kind of doctor that you are?
Well, growing up, in my neighborhood, all I ever wanted to do for my entire life was to be a doctor. I always thought it was cool. My mom said when I was 4 years old, she said, I was at the doctor's office with her, and I said, boy, Mom, I want to be a doctor. And when I grow up someday, I'm going to buy you a Cadillac and become a doctor, And she laughed. And
did you ever buy her a Cadillac?
No, sadly, she didn't live long enough.
Didn't live long enough.
And that's what fueled me
right
to really, being a single parent in the projects, not having any help, never knowing your father. It's a lot to overcome, but it's not, because I've been very lucky that our community has, so many people in our community has really helped me to get to where I am today, and has had such an influence on me in my life, that, well, the biggest influence obviously is my mother. But after seeing what happened to her and how she was treated, that fueled it even more for me.
When you say treated, because she lived in a public housing
Well,
project?
what happened is she had a heart attack, and this is in early 90s. And because it's a geographical thing, and it's because she had a Medicaid card, she didn't get transferred to Pittsburgh to get, TPA or angioplasty. So she just had her heart attack, and her right heart died, and she died in the first semester of medical school for me. And that's what has always fueled me, because the biggest thing about the folks that I grew up with and anybody around town is we're so quick to judge people that a lot of people are that are felt as less. But when you really, really, really get to know folks and know they are no different than anybody else, they care about the same things everybody does, and there's so much beauty in them that people just breeze by. Because I call those folks the trees, right? Because my mom worked as a cook at the church right down the street from here. Which is, so she'd be really proud that I'm here talking with you today, because she was a very humble, simple person.
People in med school, there are those that are there, maybe their legacy, their parents were doctors, whatever, and they decided. But most of them are there because they want to help people. You don't go through what you went through.
No.
You don't do all of the, as a resident, and, you're working like a dog and all of that you have to do, the kind of physical pain you have to go through just to make grades and, in order. You don't do all of that because you think you're going to get rich. I can't imagine you do that.
No, there's a lot easier ways. And if you're smart enough to get into medical school and do all that stuff, you could easily do something else and make a lot of money. You really, truly, to go through the stuff that we have in residency, really want to do nothing more than to care for people. The problem is the system doesn't set it up for physicians and nurses and pharmacists to really do the care that they want to. Now, that's the problem. And it leads to a couple bad eggs on the provider side, gaming the system. And a lot of the time, especially in primary care, it's just to survive. I'm not saying gaming the system's ever right, but I'm saying when you set up a system that's built off of insurance and not built off care, you're going to end up with these kinds of results. And that's the toughest thing to fix in this country, because people don't understand. We're on the brink of a crash, and it's not a policy problem, it's a math problem. And here's the reason. You can't continue to call something that's insurance, because that's what we buy insurance, that 80% of the people under the age of 65 who buy it use it. Imagine if 80% of people who bought cars wrecked or burnt the house down. It doesn't work.
Right.
Eventually, we've been fighting this for years and years and years, but now I think we're getting to the point where it's going to all come to a head. And the prediction out there was by 2030, the average family premium will be higher than the average median income. And they think now that's even going to be shorter than that. So that's what's scary about all this.
This episode is personal in a lot of ways, because we're going to take a look back from a different perspective of an event that we are marking this week, which is the 24th anniversary of the attack of September 11th. And in particular, this episode is about the crash, downing, we'll figure that out in a bit here, of Flight 93 in a strip mine just outside of Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And I am pleased to share this platform today with a former colleague who just reminded me how long ago we last spoke in person, which was literally the day he left a former employer of both of us. So he's making me feel much older than I already am, which is difficult to do because when you're my age, you feel it every day. But we want to welcome John Meyer, who, I don't know, John, what do I call you? Anchor, reporter, dad, husband. Am I missing any other titles?
I guess I could go through the checklist. I think you got them all there.
Okay.
Yeah.
John
Good to
works,
see you, Marty.
It's good to see you, but John works at WNEP in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, that television market. But John and I work together at WTAJ in Johnstown, and we were working the morning of September 11th, 2001. Now, John was already in the office, had been in the office, and we'll get to the particulars in a second. And so he was already at work. I was at home when I got a phone call from my wife who said, "Are you watching the Today Show?" And because of me being who I am, and you'll appreciate this, John, I said, "Right. How often do I watch the Today Show?" Which wasn't a frequent thing of mine. She goes, "Well, you should put it on because a plane went into the World Trade Center." So that's how my day starts. Your day starts as a normal, everyday, I'm a reporter. Were you working with JD that day? Was he your photographer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
JD Kirkpatrick, the late JD, one of the coolest people I ever met in my entire life. Definitely a man that walked to the beat of his own drum. And so you guys are going in, you go in, you get in the car, you're out on an assignment, and then tell me what happens.
It played out here. I'll just step back to it because you brought up the Today Show. So I had the normal shift as a reporter to go into work around 9.
Right.
And I also was watching the Today Show right before I left for work, and I saw what had played out in New York. And just as I was leaving for work, I saw what played out in Washington. I walked into the WJAC newsroom, and immediately the scanner was talking about a plane that was missing and believed to be heading towards Johnstown. And the first response from most of the people in the newsroom were, what's going on here?
Right, right.
And so one of our reporters and her photographer, they were dispatched to the airport in Johnstown. JD and I were in the newsroom listening to the scanner calls. And next thing you know, the scanner starts talking about a plane heading towards past Johnstown. Then the phones start ringing. People see this low-flying plane near their house. And then the calls are, a plane just crashed near where we live in Somerset, in Shanksville, in Stoystown, all the different places they were calling us.
Right.
There was a big explosion. This plane was so low. So JD and I jumped in the news van and away we went. And off we went to Shanksville. And so we just were following these fire trucks right to where we went. As soon as they said Highland Tank on the scanner, JD knew where we were going.
Yep.
And so next thing you know, we're following these fire trucks over a hill, and we're in the middle of just this big field. JD told me this is an old strip mine.
Yep.
And we park along this dirt road because fire trucks are starting to park. And he said to me, "Johnny, you go along and see what's going on. I got to get my gear." So I ran up over this little knoll, and I come up over the knoll, and there's that field in front of me. And the whole time, JD and I are talking about this plane, that we're going to see a plane wreckage when we get there.
Right, right.
And he's saying, and I agreed, I'm a kid reporter at this point, 24 years old.
Yep.
And he was saying, if we get there and there's a big plane that's wrecked, we have to help the people first.
That's JD.
And then cover the news.
That's JD.
And so in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to come over this hill and there's going to be a big plane crashed in this field. And then what are we going to have to do? And I got over the field and there was no big plane. There's just a growing group of firefighters and state police at the far edge of the field next to some woods. And I just see some smoke coming from there. So I ran across the field. And next thing I knew, I was standing right where they were, right next to this big crater in the ground. That I see the crater you're showing on the field. I stood right next to that and was looking down into that crater. And I asked one of the firefighters next to me, "Where's the plane?" And he just shrugged as if we don't know. And that was what we would learn later, is that Flight 93 came after it had flipped over and that fight on board. That plane went straight into the ground.
Right.
It was an old strip mine, so they figured there was at least 30 to 60 feet of loose soil, and it just plowed into there and buried itself.
Let me interrupt for just a second. I had gotten a phone call from the office to come in. At the time, I was the main anchor, so, we need you in here. Okay, fine. I'm still not sure why I decided to go down the Route 56 bypass from my house. There were other ways to get, I don't know if there was road construct. For some reason, I went downtown to get on Minocqua Boulevard, you're familiar, to go back up and
Of
to go
course.
to JC. And as I get down to the bottom of the bypass and I'm getting off, there's fire trucks and police cars and ambulances that are racing up the bypass towards Richland. So I don't know what's going on. I have no idea that there's a plane in Pennsylvania at this point. I just know what happened in Washington and in New York, and they need me at the station. So I call in, and if you remember, our standby general manager, Mark Barish, because we had just been purchased
Yes.
by Cox, and Mark was like acting as our general manager. And I call into the newsroom, and he answers the phone, which struck me as odd because then I realized he was in charge of what was going on in the newsroom. He had just kind of moved the news director aside. Mark was thinking, I'm Pittsburgh, I know these, whatever, So, and I call, and I get him on the phone, and I said, listen, I don't know what's going on. He said, well, here's what you need to know. And he starts to tell me about a 757 with a bomb on board headed for the Johnstown airport. We need you in here as quick as you can get here, but you cannot tell anybody what I just told you, because that's information being shared by federal and state authorities with us, and we can't reveal that. Now, at that moment, as I'm sitting in my car, I'm starting to go up Minocqua Boulevard. My wife is working at the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, which is a literal stone's throw from the airport. My son
Yeah.
is working for the American Heart Association in an office building in Richland Township, which is a stone throw from the airport. And my daughter is working at St. Francis University in Loretto, while certainly not close by as you drive or walk, but in the air, not far, not knowing at this point. And I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do if I can't call my wife and tell her what I'm not supposed to tell her, because what do I tell her then?
Good point.
So I don't say
Yeah.
anything because I can't. I don't call anybody, but I'm like, all this emotion and going through my head, and I'm thinking of my family. I'm not thinking about anything else. And I get into the station and I go up into the newsroom. I forget who met me there, and I ask, and they tell me that the plane crashed in Shanksville. And I've always regretted this thought, but I understand why it happened. I was relieved. And I mean no disrespect to the hardy souls who were
course
on
not.
board that plane, but my family was safe. So
It
that
was just the natural dad-husband
Sure,
reaction.
because you don't know. At that point, we had no idea of the magnitude
No.
of what was going on that day. This week, a guy who's in the news a lot is our guest, a person who's very involved in what I would call a political movement, not necessarily political parties, but a political movement. And as we're about to learn, a friend of Charlie Kirk, which makes this conversation even more relevant. We welcome to our program tonight Cliff Maloney, who is CEO of a group called Citizens Alliance. As I was just telling our producer, I've known Cliff since he went to college at the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown. How many years ago was that, brother? That was quite a while ago, wasn't it?
Graduated 2014. I think we moderated 2 debates
Yep.
during the 12 cycle.
Yeah.
Chris and Rothfuss.
Yeah, and back then you were just a poli-sci nerd, like a lot. I would call myself a political science nerd. So, we weren't either one of us that impressed with each other. Certainly not that impressed with ourselves, but we did do that, and that was fun. And that was a much simpler time in our political stratosphere, which we'll talk about shortly. But let's go to the friendship that you had with Charlie Kirk. I'm not sure that people who knew him have still been able to process exactly what happened, but that's where I want to start with you. I reached out to you. I believe I texted you the day of or the next day, and you said you were numb. You'd lost a friend. So without I don't want to dig deep into your psychosis, but he was somebody you knew. That had to be a shock to the system.
Yeah, and look, Marty, I don't really think it has fully hit me yet. I think there's different waves to this. I was down in Florida with the Turning Point, which is Charlie's group with Turning Point's one of their spokeswomen and one of their major funders. We were meeting to talk strategy just about 2026 and even 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And the spokeswoman came back to the table and said they shot Charlie, and she was obviously very upset. And there's about a million things that go through your mind. Well, did they shoot him in the foot? Is he okay? Is he
Sure,
alive? Is he not
sure.
alive? And the next 30 minutes of just waiting and scrolling, and then that 30 minutes culminating with, unfortunately, having to watch that video that so many of us saw, and immediately, knowing that the odds of him surviving were
Yeah.
not great. It was tough. And then to watch Erica give her speech, Charlie's wife, 2 days later on Friday night, that hit pretty hard, right? That was a moment that I won't forget. But it almost kind of sprung me back to like, listen, if she's that strong, then we have to. And I'll tell your audience, Marty, I mean, I'm a kid that went to UPJ, graduated 2014, was going to be a teacher, did some time at Richland Elementary, and decided that, the political world was something I wanted to dive into.
Right.
And I'm happy to tell kind of the full Charlie story, but Charlie Kirk was really the reason that our group, Citizens Alliance, we launched something called the PA Chase, and we were in charge of Trump's whole ballot chase effort, specific to Pennsylvania. And I have Charlie and my friendship with him to kind of thank for encouraging me and almost assigning me to run that statewide program in 2024.
At the moment this happened, and I grew up on television. I mean, I grew up with television as a part of my life. I just did an interview on Monday with the CEO of Nexstar, Perry Sook, and we talked about where television has been and where it's going. And I remember certain events. I remember the moonwalk of 1969. I remember the JFK assassination. I was in sixth grade. And one of the other things, I remember Ronald Reagan after the Challenger explosion and how he tried to bring the country together. And I remember Barack Obama after Sandy Hook. And I thought to myself, this is why I'm glad I never want to have a chance to be president of the United States, because how do you do that? The consoler in chief thing that we try to bring people back. And then I saw President Trump from the Oval Office tonight, Charlie, and he's talking about vengeance. And I'm thinking to myself, because I was praying, I said, please let all of us from across the spectrum lay down our arms, and I don't mean that literally, but let's just try to find a way to say a father and a husband was killed for expressing ideas in the country where that's what we were founded on. And let's just put all the other stuff aside. There'll be plenty of time for that. And just try to say, let's find a way to end this. And I don't think the president accomplished that night. And I wonder about you, because, you get into the political realm. That's your job, okay? You fight the left, the right fight. It goes on and on. It's been going on. Although I'm old enough to remember when people actually got together at bars in D.C. and had a way of, figuring things out. Is that where we need? Why can't we just take that pause and step back and say, forget the ideology? We just lost a person that died doing what makes America the country it is. Can't we do that?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I had the same hope you did, which was, that maybe this would be a moment where people could come together. But I think, Marty, all that was crushed within the first 30 minutes. I mean, I think two things happened with this brutal murder. Number one, I do think we're at a spiritual battle in the country.
Yep.
And you don't have to talk Christian faith, but just good versus evil. I think this is a very clear-cut example of somebody speaking, whether you agree or disagree with them, and somebody that says that we want him to stop speaking and I'm going to take his life.
Right.
99.9% of people would say that's good versus evil. We obviously call this out. The second thing that happened was the rabid response. And you could argue, well, the internet's just, things move much more quicker. People are screenshotting things and posting them. But that rattled me the most, were these people celebrating a friend of mine getting shot.
Yeah,
People
listen, I do not. That bothered me a lot. So I wasn't trying to lay this on one side or the other, because that really upset me, made me mad. And because of my job, I cannot respond to people on the internet. I can't, because trust me, I was at my keyboard getting ready to do that, but I can't. But I just think, can't we find a way to just take the temperature down everywhere?
Right, but what got me was this wasn't a bunch of radicals on Reddit. These were teachers from my childhood. These were nurses, doctors, people that are respected in the community. And I probably agree with you more than you think, because when I saw that, my initial reaction is, man, some of these people really buy into this idea that if somebody represents your opposing views and you consider it hateful, or you consider that person to be a fascist, then it is justified to murder them.
No,
And
it's
when I
never
saw
justified. No.
normal people saying that, so do I agree with all the responses? No, I'm not here to say that. Do I agree with the idea that I want things to be toned down? Yes, but I think you have to ask the people that are celebrating the death of a 31-year-old kid, what is it that drives them to do that? And I
Completely
think
agree.
that to me is the focus
Yeah.
of trying to get this situation to where we don't see more violence.
We're really pleased because we have a guest today that I have to be honest. I floated the idea of this with our guest, and I said, "I don't know. Do you think he'd be willing to talk?" And we made an inquiry, and he said, "Sure." Which I have to be honest with you, Perry, that surprised me a little bit. And I'm talking to Perry Sook, who is our guest on this episode, but he's also, as it says underneath his name, chairman and CEO of Nexstar. And in the short order, Nexstar owns WTAJ and another, how many stations right now, Perry?
Another 200 around the country, 40 states.
And I understand you're a Du Bois native?
That is correct.
So from Du Bois to Dallas, was there anything in your early life in Pennsylvania that you would have imagined yourself being where you are now?
Well, there were a lot of stops between Du Bois and Dallas, as you
I
can
understand.
imagine. But I grew up a Pittsburgh Pirates fan and listening to Bob Prince on radio and television, and I got into the business because I wanted to be the next Bob Prince.
All right.
That's kind of how it all started.
Have you ever been?
1976
Have you
grad
ever?
of Du Bois High School and lifelong resident of Clearfield County until I went away to college.
Have you ever been on air?
Yes, my first radio job was in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, which, as you all know, is famous one day a year. And so I was on the air weekends and weekend evenings generally. I also sold advertising in the summertime and put every dollar of commissions I made into the gas tank of my parents' 1973 Chrysler New Yorker as I was driving around Jefferson County trying to interest people in buying ads on the radio station. Did some play-by-play of Little League baseball and then did that again in college when I got to school. But that was my first stop, was at WPME in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania.
As I was getting ready for this, I was thinking about my relationship with television, and born in 1952, so I equate things in my life with TV because that's what TV was for a lot of us. Like as a child, I remember Saturday morning cartoons. I mean, you got up and you went out and you watched, cartoons all morning long. When I was in sixth grade, they wheeled a television set into our classroom so we could watch the coverage of the assassination of President Kennedy. As a teen, I was in my parents' living room watching the moon landing, fascinated by the fact that we could get as not as good as it was, but still a signal from the moon. And as an adult, you think of the terror attacks of 9/11. I remember vividly President Obama addressing the nation after Sandy Hook, and then, of course, January 6th and the things that have followed. So television has always been a vital part of my life. Would you agree that that's the nature of the business?
I would. We focused our company and my two companies in which I had an ownership stake in local television because we believe that is kind of the bedrock of our communities, and that it's now the last bastion of journalism in our communities, where newspaper has become a de minimis industry, and local radio doesn't do the job it used to do in terms of providing local news. So where do you go to get your local reporting? It is in local television news. And so local television stations, in my view, are a local service business. We produce local content, which is our local news, our lifestyle shows, plus shows now on our streams, as we're doing right now, which is original local content, generally professionally produced, generally reliable, generally truthful, and we go home to those viewers on a local branded television station. I remember WTAJ when I was a young lad was WFBG,
Right.
and it was the first television station that I ever visited in my life, as I was a guest of the Big John Riley show because I
Mm.
had won some VFW Voice of America script writing contest. So we own a network, the CW, Nexstar does. We own a cable news network called News Nation. But the bedrock of what we do is local news and information in our markets. And in fact, the company today produces over 330,000 hours a year of local content. And that's really our calling card. And, we do two things as a local service business. We produce this content, and then we help local businesses sell things. That's our reason to exist. Yes, we rent programming from a network and we rent programming from syndicators and we don't own any of that. We just rent it and try and monetize it with ad sales. But the bedrock of what we do is local news, sports, and weather. And so I was around, obviously, in the business before there was the Fox network. And there were television stations like WGN in Chicago, which we own, KTLA in Los Angeles, which we own, independent stations that built a behemoth local news operation. And that's how they chose to serve the community rather than passing through network programming. But so there'll be local TV stations. There were TV stations before there were networks. There'll be TV stations if the networks go away. And we've invested the entire proceeds of this company in building local news across the country and local television stations that produce local news. And as I say, in the media business, we're in the least sexy but most sticky part of the media ecosystem. And what I mean by that is we have relationships. People go home to watch Marty. They go home to watch WTAJ. Nobody goes home to watch a Nexstar TV station or CBS in Johnstown, Altoona. They go home to watch WTAJ. They know who that is. They trust who that is, and we have a responsibility with that. And now with WTAJ Plus, and we're launching Plus. Streams across all of our local markets. It's just another way to reach the viewers with content that maybe doesn't fit neatly into a half-hour newscast, and to reach the viewers and the consumers and the advertisers where they are, whether it's on the phone, on a little screen in the office, on a big screen in the den. But it's our responsibility to reach the viewers where they are, and that's why this business is evolving. But as I tell people, we don't have red carpet, premieres like the Emmys or things like that, but we'll go to the opening of a new supermarket or a new furniture store or a car dealer because that's in service to our local community. Excuse me. So the business, I think, will continue to survive. The what we do doesn't change, which is serve the communities with information and helping local businesses to sell stuff. But the how we do it is changing and will continue to change.
So what's the future of linear TV? We went home when we were kids and we sat in the living room, which or wherever the family gathered, that's where the television was. Will that continue like it's been, or doesn't that have to change with the way we're moving, or will it stay the same?
Well, my opinion, our company's opinion, is that people will watch live TV. What they watch on TV live is live TV, live news, live sports, live award shows, live competition shows. What they don't have a motivation to do now is watch scripted entertainment live, because they can watch that on a streaming platform. They can record it on their DVR. And so we've seen a big move away from watching sitcoms and detective shows live. People will binge those on the weekend when they have time, but people still tend to watch live news and live sports live. And we think that's where the future of linear TV will go. Look, we built the CW from an entertainment network that basically ran, comic book shows, fanboy shows, into a network that now 40% of the programming is sports, because everybody understood the value of the broadcast audience. And the one thing we have, which we will always have, is ubiquitous reach. Our signal is available free over the air to everyone in the viewing area that has an antenna or has a pay TV subscription they pay for. But the fact that all of these streamers exist because they don't have what we have, which is the ability to reach the entire population of the market or the country.
So to be able to have a long form conversation really helps us take a look at what's happening in our community. And today we're going to do that with a young lady who is involved with what's called the Because We Care Foundation. Jessica DeGennaro is with us. Jessica, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Coming in and taking time out of your day. I'm glad that your homeschool daughter is happy that you're here today and not there.
Yes.
So you can tell her I was happy she got the pass. And anytime she needs one, she can reach out to me and I'll call you in to do a little recording.
I will tell her.
Yeah.
I bet you she will call you.
Oh, I know. I would. I know if I had the opportunity when I was in school, I would have done the same thing. All right, let's start at the beginning. Because We Care Foundation. Great name. What does it mean? What do you do?
So the Because We Care Foundation, we like to provide comfort in crisis situations and also to bring connection with compassion for children in the community.
Give me an idea of a crisis situation.
So if there is a child that's involved with a police officer, say it's a domestic dispute between the parents.
Right.
Cops have to go on the call, kids are involved. That enables the officers during that call to provide that child with a bear, provide them with some comfort, distraction.
With a
from-
physical teddy bear, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so how did the teddy bear thing, I don't want to get ahead of us, but when you start talking about providing them with a bear, I mean, it sounds like but where'd that concept come from? How did you get to there?
So it all started back in 2015, where my daughters, Autumn and Paige, had wanted to do something good for our police department. The reason that even came about was my oldest daughter, Autumn, had come across a story of a deputy go forth down in Texas that had went to, he was on scene of an accident, left that scene, and then went to go get gas in his vehicle. While he was pumping gas in his vehicle, a perpetrator came up from behind him, shot him up multiple times, and then when he fell down, the perpetrator got over top of him and murdered him. He left behind a wife and 2 kids. And that really just impacted my daughter's heart, that she wanted to do something for, our law enforcement officers, to show them, guess what? We're not against you. We're for you.
Right.
We care about you. So her and her sister decided to take some money that they had saved for our Disney vacation.
You were going on a vacation,
yes,
right?
to Disney. And they had saved up some money from doing chores. And they took that money and some of it and went and purchased lunch for each of the shifts at the Altoona Police Department. The following day, after they had dropped off that lunch, we got contacted and they wanted us to bring the girls down so they could have a tour, of the department. And so the girls did. They gave a huge tour of everything: the cars, the holding cells, like everything in the department. We went upstairs where Chief Freeling, her office was, and we walked in, and Chief Freeling handed both of my girls a card. So when we opened up those cards, we noticed there was not only signatures by every officer that was on the force, but there was a $100 Disney gift card in each one. And we were just blown away because, we've taught our daughters, when you do something good, you do it from your heart, not expecting anything in return.
Exactly. But I also know from your background that this is personal in a lot of ways. And while it's never easy to talk about it, I know that it's part of your story. It's part of the foundation of the foundation. And I think it's important for people to understand that while they may say, wow, that Jessica DeGennaro, she does a really good job giving those teddy bears, it's a lot more than that. So as carefully as we can, you had some issues as a young girl, right? Not woman.
Correct.
Yeah. How old were you
Yes.
in this?
When it's 8 years old.
And at 8, what happened?
So I was abused by a family member from the age of 8 to the age of 12,
Physically, sexually?
sexually.
By a family member.
Yes.
And you were 8
Yes.
when it started, 12 when it ended.
Correct.
That's a while ago.
Yeah.
I
long time
mean,
ago.
I don't think it's that long ago because you're
Yeah.
not that old. But I would have a tough time remembering anything of when I was 8. Of course, I'm a lot older than you are. But can you go back? Is that part of your life cemented within you that that's always there? Or have you found your way to get past it? Or Was this a way to get you past that?
I think I've healed from that trauma that took place. It took a long time for that healing.
But
to
4
come.
years, did you tell anybody?
No, it's a secret that I had kept for quite a while.
Was it a secret that your abuser said, you will keep this secret? Because we often hear that.
Yes, that was part of it. The other part was just the shame
Yeah.
and humiliation that
Did
came
anybody
along
know?
with that.
Not
No,
any of your friends? You couldn't talk?
No.
So you kept this within you.
it did.
That had to be horrible.
It was. It was very horrible. Keeping that secret inside of me created a lot of turmoil and hate and anger for everybody around me,
Sure.
for my parents, for God. Like, I grew up in a Christian home. That's not something that you would think would happen.
God's not supposed to let these kinds of
Yeah.
things happen.
And, that's something I held on for a long time. Like, if God truly loved me, he never would have allowed that to happen to me. Boy, that was a lie. We all have free will. My abuser did too. And he chose to do something wrong.
And it's still tough to remember.
Oh, yes, there's parts of it that is tough to remember.
You
Absolutely.
think you'll ever forget it?
Forget it? No. Have I forgiven it? Yes. And I think that's where the power is.
Oh, there's no question.
Yep.
So you've forgiven your abuser
Yes.
and you've moved on past that. You don't have a
Yes.
relationship with this person, or you do?
No, this abuser passed away a couple years ago.
So God took care of that problem. Sorry, that's my
No,
take on
that's
this.
very true.
Yeah.
I knew in my heart when the day that I was able to forgive him, I knew that if I never saw justice on this earth, that one day I would have justice when he met his maker.
Yeah. So now you take that experience. You were alone. You had been abused. You probably didn't even know what was going on at the
Yeah.
time it was going. Because how would you? You were 8.
Yeah.
So till 12, how did you stay silent for 4 years? Is it just you couldn't talk to people about it?
Yeah, I couldn't.
Well, then that's got to help you in trying to form what the foundation does, because you're trying to break through, right?
Correct.
And so help me understand how your personal involvement makes the work of this foundation as meaningful as obviously it is to you.
Well, because I know the importance of having that early intervention in
Yeah.
a child's life after something takes place. You never hear of anything bad coming from something good in that regard. Yeah.
So today, you've obviously told this story,
Yes.
some of it. You're getting ready to tell it to a much larger audience, or you did. I can't remember what the
No,
dates
October 18th.
were. Okay, I knew it's
Yeah.
coming up,
Yeah.
where you're going to speak to a much larger group
Yes.
and share this, which is going to take a hell of a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And I know you, as much as you prepare for that, it's not going to be the same when you stand up in that room.
You're
Is it?
correct.
Yeah, and you've probably thought about it.
Yes.
And you'll do rehearsals and you'll run through. And if you're like me, and I've been in a situation where I've had to share some family, nothing close to what you went through.
Yeah.
But my mother was an alcoholic and died of alcoholic poisoning, and I had to speak to a group of graduates at a drug treatment center in Johnstown, a Christ-driven, and I had a prepared remarks talking to them about, typical graduation, this is what you should do and take this and all this other stuff. And I threw it all out the window and I started talking about what it might have been to me, what it had meant to me if there had been a program like this particular program at the time my mom was struggling. And I went back and I told very honest stories of what my mom's last few years on earth were like. She always had a coffee mug with her, and of course she was always drinking coffee, and she would buy something called USA whiskey, which I think was like $2 a fifth. So I'm telling this audience, I said, she's drinking rot gut because that's all she can afford.
Yeah.
She was on food stamps, although she wouldn't use them because those are for the poor people. Mom, you are. But point is, it was an awfully traumatic time in my life,
Yeah.
And how she died was especially traumatic for me. And I'm trying to tell this story, and I look out and there's people are wiping their eyes and stuff, and I didn't realize I was crying at the moment because you go right into your soul. So that's basically what you've done.
Yeah.
You've opened a window into your soul, and you're letting people in.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
think just being honest and authentic and letting people see who I am.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think you could live in Blair County or its environs and not know about what we're going to talk about today. The event is one thing, but the people who run the event that you're about to meet are, I don't even know how to describe them, is that they're like world famous celebrities because they're on TV. They collectively, they may have been on TV more than I have, but and it's a mother-daughter duo, which is unusual for this program, but we're very happy. Mom is Denise, daughter is Sienna. Both of them are Stones. Denise is the founder of the Blair County Food Drive, and Sienna is on the board of directors as a VP. If you say Blair County Food Drive and you've lived here for any length of time, and I'm going to start with you, Denise, I don't know that anybody alive would not know what we're talking about. You have done a phenomenal job making this event an event with a capital E. So I want to take it back to when it started. How many years ago?
So I started doing Food Drive about 23 years ago.
Okay.
And each year since then, the need has just gotten bigger and bigger.
That's a lot of work for a 10-year-old if it was 22 years ago. Okay.
My favorite person today.
But 22 years ago, we think we talk a lot about need for people to have food like it's a brand new thing that,
Right.
Obviously 22 years ago, I'm sure the need was great as it is today, not as great as it.
I would say there was a great need, but the need has definitely increased. I mean, each year that I speak with all of the different organizations, and this year we're giving to close to 35 different nonprofit groups. And just from when we did Food Drive in the spring till now, the need has already gone up even higher. And it's heartbreaking.
Sienna, you said you're 23.
I am.
So you would not have had much of a concept other than being her mother and being around this. But I'm assuming that as you grew up, as most of us grew up in families where, we had to eat, we ate. We didn't think about it. We were fortunate. We were blessed. I grew up in a very middle-class family in Ohio. We ate some meals that, my wife says, why don't you ever order salmon? And I said, because my mother used to make what were called salmon patties out of the stuff that came in a can. I don't think it was salmon, but I had it so many times. I don't order salmon when I go out. Point is, you didn't grow up in an atmosphere where you were hungry.
Yeah.
Did you have a vision? Did you understand what your mom was working to? Did you feel the depth of what it was?
Yeah, I think growing up, so involved in the food drive. I mean, I was 6 months old when she started this, so there's quite literally a time that I just don't remember doing this.
Right.
But it's one of those things that I think I'm very appreciative of it because I grew up with a different perspective because I was aware, our Thanksgiving family tradition was the food drive. That's what I looked forward to for Thanksgiving because I knew that's what we did as a family before the food drive. But being so close to the groups and growing up knowing them and hearing all the stories over the years, I feel like helped my perspective of knowing, it's a small community, but it doesn't mean there's not a need for food.
Do you think people of your generation understand that need? And I'm not talking about direct friends because they would, because they see what you do.
Yeah.
But do you think people in their early 20s would have that feeling, or are they more concerned about other things?
I think it depends on who you meet. I mean, obviously, with us living in the digital age, there's a lot of things being shown on, the media about it. But also, some people might not be so concerned because it's not affecting them.
Sure.
And that can go with any generation. But if they're not seeing it or if it's not something that's in their lives actively, they might not just even think about it.
When I was in elementary school, my family lived in Logan Hills Apartments. It was a challenging time for our family, but we always had. My parents both worked a lot
Mm-hmm.
and, had the babysitters, and my older sister would watch us and things like that. And then by the time I was in 6th grade, we moved into a house and life looked a little different then. But for me, I have always been able to approach people and I don't want to say sales, but kind of like getting out there and being out and about with people, and some may say I have a gift for gab, which I won't deny.
No,
But-
you're
but
confident,
I
and
think that-
you can talk about things that are important to you. That's not a gift of gab.
Well,
That's a talent.
My
but-
husband may differ on that one,
Well,
but
you don't think my wife has any thoughts about me? Are you kidding me? Okay.
Yeah. But the thing is I truly believe that I was put in that grocery store that day whenever I saw this young mom and her 2 kids. And I was a couple people back from her, and she only had about 10 or 12 items on the conveyor belt there. And she kept leaning over to the cashier and saying, okay, can you take and put those 2 back? And then she'd, take those off the
Because
checkout.
she didn't have enough
She
money.
didn't have enough money.
She watched it as it's going up.
So she ended up with about 3 or 4 items. And that was the moment that I knew that something needed to be done. I worked my way through around the person in front of me, had them hold my stuff, had the lady at the cashier hold her stuff. And I spent probably the next 20, 30 minutes out in the parking lot talking to this young mom, hearing her story, got her information, and I ended up taking like a car full of food over to her house. And that's when I was like, okay, like
This is
I
one,
can
but
do
there's
this.
got to be a lot more
Yeah.
than one, right?
Yeah.
I feel like
yeah.
it's also one thing that I've learned recently is you can't always control the cards you've been dealt, but you can control how you play them. So it's like you can't
That's so
control, but you can choose the actions that follow.
That's excellent. I've never heard it put that way, but I like that, and I'm going to steal it. I'm going to
That's
use.
okay. I give you permission.
Okay, thank you. Give me the lay of the land. What happens? Where does it happen? How does it happen? Because we haven't talked about the mechanics of the food drive.
So for our fall food drive, it actually takes well over 1,200 volunteers to be able to make this the success that it is
Really?
at the capacity that we have built it to. We are now at 3 different locations. We are at Sam's Club and Walmart in Altoona, and we are at East Freedom Walmart. Now, we just pulled in East Freedom Walmart last fall. That was our first time bringing in our 3rd store. And typically, we do Sam's Club for 10 days, and last year we did both Walmarts for 7 days each. This year, we're also doing the Altoona Walmart for 10 days.
Okay.
So we are continuously trying to keep expanding what we're doing.
The need
And
is growing,
it
so
is.
why wouldn't the response
Sadly,
grow?
it is.
Yeah.
And as long as we have the volunteers that are stepping up and saying, yeah, you know what, we want to be a part of this. We want to help. And they're of all ages. I mean, we have volunteers that have been volunteering with me since they were coming with their parents. And some of them are now adults with their own children, and they're bringing them back.
Tonight, I thought we'd talk about a subject that rarely gets any discussion, especially on this program. I mean, who cares about whether your state has a budget or not? Obviously, being very, very facetious. My guest, I don't know, I'm getting to the point where I think maybe she should be the co-host of this program because she's been on. Judy, is this your 3rd or 4th time?
This is my third time.
Third time, okay. And we honestly thought when we talked the first time about the budget that it would only be a matter of days until we had a conclusion. And then I said, well, sometime in the future, we'll have you back on. Well, this is the time that we thought was going to happen much, much earlier. We finally have a budget. How many hundred and what days late was it? Do you know off the top of your head? I should have.
142 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it was like it took forever.
Did.
And forgive me, I didn't dive into the whys and wherefores, all the line items looking, but I'm kind of, looking around, looking at capsules of what it meant.
Yeah.
This was a lot of time to come to an agreement on a number that was basically a number that you floated and others floated right around that neighborhood weeks ago, that if we could get to compromise on both sides. The last time you were here, you said your proposal had been a flat line, just keep it as last year. That didn't happen. This is a little less than 5% more, which in terms of budgets seems like a lot, is a lot of money, but it's not a lot compared to what it could have been. The question I have for you is, why did it take so long if this is where we settled?
I think it is a large spend number. It's
Well, in terms of 50 billion, a 4.7% increase isn't that much in terms of the top number. That's what I'm trying to say.
yeah, but a lot of members were very uncomfortable with that higher spend number,
Right.
And we're not bringing in as much. It doesn't balance, but we've made it balance,
Right.
And I'll explain that in a little bit. But it was a higher spend number than many of us were comfortable with, but we got a lot of policy things, a lot of things that will help us moving forward as a Commonwealth. And I'm very, very excited about that. You have to remember, it's a product. This budget is a product
Absolutely.
of negotiation between the Democrat House majority
Right.
and the Democrat governor's office and a Republican Senate. So divided government. Everybody had to, be okay with some of this.
Sure.
And really that, I would say that's probably why the Republican Senate held the line for so long, because there were, if you're going to spend this much money, we need to change things in the Commonwealth so we're not in this position
All
again.
right. The top 3 highlights of what you got that you think are best for the people of the Commonwealth.
Sure. So one of them is the abrogation of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
That was a
RGGI.
big one, wasn't
And we
it?
talked about that.
Yes.
And that essentially is a tax to power plants or any job creator that emits so much CO2, and they have to pay. You get a certain baseline. If you emit more than that, you have to pay taxes, very high taxes, and that gets passed on to the consumer. So this is a huge energy win for Pennsylvania. It means that their electric bills will not be, they may go up, but not in the way they would have if we had joined this RGGI, this Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is what Governor Wolf wanted to put us in and what Governor Shapiro has wanted us to do. And he's gone to the courts about it. So this was a big win for Pennsylvania. I think we've got a lot of things in here that are accountability measures, some reforms to our welfare system, reforms to human service agencies, but our welfare system, checking records, death records, so people aren't getting benefits that have died. I mean, that's pretty simple. Some of those accountability, checking the employment rolls and just cross-checking to make sure people are not getting benefits who don't deserve them. And that was something I think is very important. Other economic wins, permitting reform. In Pennsylvania, it's very difficult to get permits if you're going to move ground, more than 1 acre of ground, if you are going to you maybe have a farm to raise animals, a lot of things you have to get permits for, water, air, those sorts of things. So the permitting has been notoriously behind, sometimes took over a year to get a permit, which is just unacceptable. Business wants to move quickly. So we have permitting reforms that are deemed approved after so many days for certain permits. So that was a big win. We continue the corporate net income tax reduction, which is good for business, and increase our net operating loss deduction for businesses. So a lot of these things add up to policies that will bring jobs to Pennsylvania, and I'm really excited about that. Those are things that we can do to make our state a bit more appealing for business to come here. It says, I keep saying we're open for business.
Right. It's not necessarily an aid to businesses that are here, although they do benefit from the tax benefit a lot.
Yes.
It's one of the
absolutely.
reasons that they stay in business. Now, I know that education was a big deal for the governor when he laid out his plans, and there is an increase of $565 million in basic funding with $105 million for what's called the state's adequacy formula, whatever that is. But so you put in a lot of money for education, which also had a caveat in it. there's less money for charter school reimbursement. Is that so? How does that work? How does that fit the overall plan?
Yeah, so the one thing that, and I met a few weeks ago with the Blair County superintendents, and their concerns are the money that they spend for charter school.
Right.
Um,
That comes out of their budgets.
correct.
They have to support that charter school.
That is correct.
It has to be offered, and in essence, they help fund it. Otherwise, it wouldn't.
Correct.
And now you cut the amount of money that's going to go to the school districts for that?
So yeah, just some reforms to that, which will help the schools. It will save the schools, the public schools, money. It will save them a lot of money and be a bit of a relief to them because they do. And there's some controversy about some charter schools that
Sure.
are able to advertise and can offer things to parents and free laptops and all sorts of
That
things.
they're not going to get in a public setting, so that the incentive is to send your kid here, which is a money-making proposition for the charter schools.
They are for profit. And
Yeah.
I'm a big school choice person, but it needs to be on an even playing field. And some of the reforms that we did will help just reform things a little bit, give it a little bit more of an even playing field. And it will help our public school districts. It will help them quite a bit. So big savings for them.
I've really been looking forward to this episode. We're going to talk to a gentleman today who has a perspective on what probably, at least at the moment, would be the most talked about story with a connection to West Central Pennsylvania. There are a lot of stories out there, but this one is just unique. It stretches from New York City to Altoona, Pennsylvania, in ways that I don't think anybody would have ever thought that it possibly could. First, let's introduce our guest. Is Dr. John Brady, who is a forensic psychologist joining us from the Silicon Valley. I told him before we started, he's doing better there than we are here because it's winter here. And we just came through a weekend snowstorm that was no fun, but we learned how to deal with that kind of stuff. Dr. Brady, thanks so much for being here. Before we dive into why you're here, for the benefit of our audience, tell me what a forensic psychologist is and what it is you do.
Yeah, Marty, thanks. I've been looking forward to this interview also. You know, it's an important interview, especially in Altoona, which is a key piece of this geographical and criminal puzzle. So a forensic psychologist is kind of the intersection between the law and psychiatry. So we try and fit together pieces of let's say a defendant's background and integrate that into a criminal defense, or to help the attorney with a criminal defense. And this is certainly apropos in the Luigi Mangione case. So there's been other cases that I've worked on. Sirhan case, for example, that's highlighted in my book, Breakdown, where his defense actually failed and he was convicted of first-degree murder.
In the killing of Robert Kennedy. So for those that aren't aware, right.
That's right. So there are many crossover streams of criminal information that flow from that past case to the Mangione case that I've kind of carefully analyzed and outlined in my book.
In your cursory, and I say cursory because none of us were in the room when certain things, if they happened. So we're relying on other people. But in this case, it's clear that New York authorities believe that he was the gunman who walked up behind the healthcare CEO as he was entering the hotel in Manhattan and shot him in the back, and then started this, I hate to call it an escape, but I guess that's what it was, if in fact this was the guy that did the shooting. And again, we have to keep remembering, he's been charged, but he hasn't been found guilty of anything. But
No.
and just at a cursory glance, with all the work you've done on background of suspects and all that, would it ever have made sense to you that he would do this in daylight in the largest city in America, then jump on a bus and end up eating hash browns at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania.
The critical question is, as you point out and document from his background, how did he get from there to here?
Right.
So what were the psychological destabilizers that sent this young guy, this zealot, savior kind of person,
Right.
off the track to the point that he elected to 3D print a gun and to shoot a symbol of the healthcare system, Brian Thompson, in the back, a little over a year ago now.
Right,
So
right, yeah.
what led from his ordinary existence as a conforming, law-abiding person from a good family to being this radicalized, narcissistic individual who took it upon himself to become an assassin, and with obviously no remorse, and including a following of also misguided people that thought that he was on the right track. They thought that he was a Robin Hood figure, whereas in essence, he's an evil Robin Hood figure. He represents all the worst kinds of mores and judgments in society, rather than the positive aspects of what Robin Hood was out to accomplish. So when I look at these cases, Marty, what I try and do is see if there's any similarity between case A and case B. If we go back to the Ted Kaczynski case, the Unabomber, 30 years before Mangione, he was also a self-appointed revolutionary who wanted to overthrow modernity. He wanted to overthrow society and move it back into a more primitive horse and buggy, if you will, existence. So he was definitely against technology. He recommended revolution as a necessary element to reestablish the society that, in his deluded opinion, deserved, rather than a modern moving forward society. Interestingly enough, Mangione picks up on Kaczynski's behavior, and he endorses Kaczynski's manifesto, written, as I said, 30 years before, and he adopts some of the principles that Kaczynski put forth in terms of overthrowing the society, in terms of justifying revolution, in terms of striking back at an unfair system. When you have somebody like Mangione who saw all the benefits from an upper class society, he decided in his own viewpoint, from his own viewpoint, that this had to be reversed, that the principles of capitalism had to be replaced with some sort of a Marxist philosophy where egalitarianism, where equal distribution of everything would be possible. In my view, his deluded narcissistic thinking that is evident during his court appearances, where he's pumping his fist, he's acting like he's the star person. That's the exact kind of psychopathology that really surrounds this guy as a narcissistic individual who denotes to himself that he's special.